The cobblestones tremble beneath 1,000 sandals as a lone melody fights to be heard. We often picture the ancient Roman street musician as a romantic figure, a free spirit serenading the past. The reality was far more raw and desperate. I am going to show you exactly what it was like to live by your wits and your music on those chaotic streets. You will learn the secrets of their daily survival, from the instruments they clung to as lifelines to the hidden dangers waiting around every corner. How do they choose the perfect spot to perform in a city of a million voices? What kind of songs could earn a silver coin or land you in exile? By the end of this, you will know the true price of a song in the ancient world. What does it take to make your music matter when you are just another face in the crowd? Your stage was not a quiet concert hall, but a battlefield of noise and distraction. Picture yourself standing at the edge of the Subura district, Rome's most crowded and notorious neighborhood. The air is thick with the smell of baking bread, sewage, and 1,000 different spices. Donkey carts rattle by, their drivers shouting curses. Merchants scream prices for everything from cheap wine to exotic silks. Politicians on makeshift platforms bellow promises to anyone who will listen. Your first and greatest challenge is simply to be heard. Choosing the right corner was the difference between a handful of coins and a day of utter failure. You needed a place with a constant river of people, but not so crowded that you were swept away by the current. A spot near a popular fountain or a busy intersection was ideal, but these prime locations were fiercely contested. Perhaps you would seek the shelter of a stone archway, not just for a moment of shade, but for the way the curved stone could capture and amplify your voice, turning your lonely melody into something that could stop a person in their tracks for just a second. But even the best acoustics came with risks. You had to always keep one eye out for the vigiles, the city's watchmen who patrolled the streets. They were part firemen, part police, and they had the power to move you along if you were causing an obstruction or worse, disturbing a wealthy citizen on their way to the forum. Then there were your rivals, the other performers fighting for the same scraps of attention and coin. A fire eater might set up down the block, his dangerous spectacle drawing gasps from the crowd you were trying to enchant. A group of acrobats could flip and tumble into your space, their silent, breathtaking performance stealing your audience in an instant. There were unspoken rules, a fragile understanding of territory and timing. But these rules were broken more often than they were kept. A successful spot could be yours for a week before a stronger, more aggressive performer decided they wanted it. Your life was a constant negotiation, not just with your music, but with the chaotic, vibrant, and ruthless ecosystem of the street itself. Your instrument was not a choice of passion, but a matter of survival. In your hands, you held the tools that stood between you and starvation. The most common was the tibia, a double-reeded pipe often mistaken for a simple flute. Made from wood, bone, or hollow reeds, its sound was not a gentle whisper, but a reedy, penetrating wail designed to cut through the city's roar. Playing it was a physical act, your cheeks puffing, your lungs burning as you forced air through the twin pipes for hours on end. Next was the lyre, a smaller, sturdier version of the instruments played in wealthy homes. Its soundbox, often crafted from a tortoise shell, resonated with a quieter, more intimate tone. You would cradle it close, your fingers plucking the gut strings, creating melodies that had to be fought for against the background clamor. For rhythm, you might have a tympanum, a small hand drum held tight to your body, its beat a constant, grounding pulse beneath your melody. Or you used the simplest percussion, two pieces of wood clacked together, or a shaker filled with dried beans. These instruments lived a hard life. A crack in the tibia's reed could silence you for days. A broken string on the lyre was a small catastrophe, requiring costly replacement. They were extensions of your own body, suffering the same wear and tear from the sun, the dust, the occasional jostle from the crowd. This object in your hands was more than wood and gut. It was your sole companion in the chaos, the only voice you had to offer the world, and the fragile lifeline upon which your entire existence depended. Your fingers did not dance to the lofty epics of poets or the grand hymns of the state. The true currency of the street was the song of the people, a living, breathing soundtrack that changed with the mood of the crowd and the gossip of the hour. Forget the idea of solemn classical music echoing through the forum. Your daily bread was earned with folk tunes hummed in every marketplace and bawdy drinking songs belted out by legionaries on leave. These were the Carmina Convivialia, the rowdy anthems of the tavern that celebrated wine, love, and the absurdities of life. A group of tipsy merchants passing by would toss a coin for a chorus they could all shout together. But your versatility was your greatest asset. You had to be a human mirror, reflecting the energy around you. Spot a somber funeral procession moving down the adjacent street, and you might quickly switch to a mournful, plodding ballad on your tibia, a gesture of respect that sometimes earned a coin from a grieving relative. See a family heading to the games, their faces bright with anticipation, and your fingers would fly across the lyre strings, pulling out a fast, rhythmic dance tune that made children's feet skip. You were also a living newspaper. When a senator was caught in a fresh scandal or a gladiator became an overnight sensation, you would improvise. You took the hum of the city's gossip and gave it a melody, crafting simple, catchy verses that spread the news faster than any crier. A witty parody aimed at a pompous official could earn a shower of coins from a delighted crowd, but it was a dangerous game. The same song that made a butcher laugh could offend a soldier loyal to that official. Every note was a gamble, a constant reading of the room to determine whether a lament, a joke, or a dance would fill your empty purse that day. The sun has not yet reached your small room, but the city is already stirring you awake. Your home is a single chamber in a towering insula, a cramped apartment block where the sounds of your neighbors arguing and children crying seep through the thin walls. Your first act is not to stretch, but a reach for your instrument in the dim light. Your fingers trace its familiar shape, searching for new cracks in the wood or any weakness in the strings. This morning inspection is a silent ritual, a moment of quiet dread. A single fault discovered now means an entire day without earnings, a day of empty hunger. You run through a few scales, the notes hushed and careful, not to disturb anyone but to assure yourself that your voice, your only real possession, is still ready to sing. You join the river of people flowing into the city's heart, your instrument held close to your chest like a shield. The chosen spot for today, a corner near a bustling bakery, is vacant. You claim it with your presence, a solitary figure against the waking chaos. As you begin to play, your music fights to find its place in the symphony of grinding millstones and the baker's shout. The first hour is often the hardest. The crowd is purposeful, rushing to their shops or duties, their eyes sliding past you as if you were part of the street itself. Coins are rare. Your fingers begin to ache, a familiar dull pain that will only deepen as the day wears on. By midday, the sun is high and relentless. The heat bakes the stone pavement and radiates back up at you. Dust from a passing cart coats your tunic and your instrument. You play on, your throat dry, your lungs working to push air through the tibia, or your fingers moving across the lyre with a will of their own. A short break is a luxury you can scarcely afford. You find a sliver of shade against a wall, gulp water from a skin, and flex your stiff, swollen fingers. The moment you stop, another performer might take your place. So the rest is brief, anxious, always watching your territory. The afternoon stretches long and demanding. Your music must now compete with the city's full-throated roar. You battle not just the noise, but the sheer indifference of 1,000 passing faces. A family pauses for a moment, the child tugging at a mother's hand, but they move on without a second glance. A group of slaves carrying a wealthy man's litter hardly seem to notice you exist. This is the true test of endurance, a mental fight against the creeping thought that your song means nothing here. You push the doubt away and change your tune, shifting from a weary melody to a lively beat, hoping to catch the ear of a merchant closing his shop for the day. The coins that eventually land at your feet are not just payment. They are a fleeting acknowledgement that you were heard, that for one person in the endless crowd, your struggle to create beauty mattered. Dusk finally brings a cool relief and the end of your labors. Your body is exhausted, but your mind is already calculating the few coins in your pouch, wondering if they will be enough for a meal and another night in that small rented room. Every face in the rushing crowd was a potential patron or a closed door. Your survival depended on learning to read them in an instant. A wealthy patrician, draped in a toga with a purple stripe, would be escorted by a small cloud of clients and slaves. His eyes might scan the street with a detached curiosity, and if your melody caught his ear, the reward could be substantial, a silver denarius instead of a common bronze as. But you had to choose your music carefully. A complex, dignified piece on the lyre might appeal to his educated tastes, while a raucous folk song would likely make him frown and move on. Then came the merchants, their fingers often stained from counting coins. They were a tougher audience, practical and skeptical. A tune that reminded them of their hometown or a clever lyric about the follies of trade could sometimes loosen their purse strings, but they rarely parted with their money easily. The city was also filled with the quiet hum of slave labor. Groups of slaves moved through the streets on errands for their masters, their heads often bowed. They had no coins to give, but their brief appreciative glances or a rare shared smile were a different kind of payment, a silent acknowledgement of your shared struggle within the city's immense machine. Children were the most honest audience. They would stop and stare, their eyes wide, completely lost in the magic of the music until a parent tugged them away. You learned to play to their wonder, adding playful trills and bouncing rhythms, hoping to charm the adults who held the money. The most volatile patrons were the soldiers. A group of legionaries on leave, flush with pay and looking for entertainment, could be your best fortune of the day. They craved the loud, the energetic, and the familiar. A bawdy marching song or a fast beat on the tympanum could make them cheer and throw a handful of coins at your feet, but their moods were unpredictable. The wrong song, perhaps one that reminded them of a lost battle or a commander they despised, could just as easily turn their celebration into anger. Every interaction was a transaction, a fleeting exchange of art for survival that lasted only as long as the note hung in the air. You were a mirror to the city's ever-changing soul, reflecting back its many moods one song at a time. That handful of coins at your feet was not a fee for a performance. It was a gift, a tiny act of charity the Romans called sportula. There were no fixed prices, no guarantees. Your entire livelihood depended on the fleeting whims of the crowd. A typical day's earnings might amount to a small pile of bronze asses, each one a low-value coin barely worth the metal it was struck from. You would feel their weight in your palm, a rough collection that had to be enough. On a truly exceptional day, perhaps when you entertained a generous soldier or a noble in a rare good mood, a silver denarius might land with a distinct, hopeful ring. That single coin was a small fortune worth 16 of the bronze asses, and it could transform your entire week, but that silver was a rare dream. The bronze reality was quickly spent. First came the rent for your tiny room in the towering, noisy insula. That payment was a constant drain, swallowing a significant portion of your earnings before anything else. Then there was food. Your diet was the food of the common Roman, simple and cheap. A coarse loaf of bread, a handful of olives, a bit of cheese, and a lot of watered-down, sour wine. This was not a life of lavish meals, but one of basic sustenance. Your instrument was not just a tool, it was a business expense. A broken gut string for your lyre needed replacement. A cracked reed for your tibia meant you were silent and earning nothing until you could find or craft a new one. The cost of maintenance was a quiet, persistent threat. And then there were the hidden costs of the street itself. A watchman, the vigiles, might decide you were a nuisance. A coin pressed discreetly into his hand could be the difference between being allowed to stay in your prime spot and being forcibly moved along. It was an unofficial tax on your right to exist and work in the public space. We often romanticize the free-spirited musician, but the financial reality was brutally precarious. There were no sick days, no safety nets. A sudden rainstorm that emptied the streets, a sore throat that stole your voice, or simply a day when the crowd was unusually cold could mean an empty purse. You lived with the constant, gnawing knowledge that you were always one bad day away from hunger. Your entire existence balanced on the fragile, unpredictable charity of the passing crowd. The coins in your pouch were a constant, nagging source of fear. Every jingle as you walked home was a beacon to the desperate. A successful day meant you carried a small fortune, at least in the eyes of someone who had nothing. You were a target, and you knew it. Thieves stalked the darker alleyways, and a musician returning from a long day was easy prey. They would not hesitate to rob you of every single bronze as, leaving you with nothing to show for hours of aching fingers and strained lungs. But the true nightmare was the theft of your instrument. Losing your lyre or tibia was not just a loss of property, it was a catastrophic amputation of your livelihood. Without it, you had no voice, no means to earn even a single coin to buy it back. You would cradle it in your arms, not out of affection, but from a primal need to protect the very thing that kept you alive. The crowd was a shield, but it could also become a weapon in an instant. A group of drunk soldiers who had been cheerfully tossing coins an hour before could turn surly and violent. A misunderstood lyric, a song that hit a raw nerve, or simply their own shifting moods could make you the target of their frustration. A shove could send you and your instrument sprawling onto the hard cobblestones. Rival performers protected their territories with more than just loud music. A challenge over a prime spot could escalate from shouted insults to a brawl where a broken finger meant weeks without income. And then there were the general street thugs, the bullies who found entertainment in the suffering of others. You learned to read the energy of a gathering, to sense when a cheerful audience was tipping towards something dangerous, and to pack up and disappear before the first punch was thrown. Your greatest danger, however, was often invisible. The state itself could silence you with a word. Performing in public was a privilege, not a right, and you could be accused of disturbing the peace, of creating a public nuisance. The watchmen, the vigiles, had the power to haul you away if a single wealthy citizen complained that your music was interrupting their business or their peace. In some periods, you might even need a license to perform, another unofficial tax on your existence that you could rarely afford, but the most serious legal peril came from your own lyrics. A clever, improvised song mocking a powerful official or questioning the emperor's latest decree was a fast way to earn applause and coins, but it was also a direct path to exile or worse. You were a broadcaster of public opinion, and the authorities listened closely. One wrong word, one joke that landed with the wrong person in the crowd, could end your life in Rome forever. And beneath all these threats lay the ever-present shadow of your own body's fragility. A bad cough from breathing the dusty air could settle in your chest and steal your breath, the very breath you needed to play. A simple fever could leave you weak and bedridden for days, with no earnings and no one to care for you. A slip on a whetstone could twist an ankle, making the long walk to your spot impossible. There were no sick days, no doctors you could afford, no savings to see you through a week of silence. Every sunrise, you gambled your health against the hope of a few coins. The music was your life, but the moment it stopped, whether by theft, violence, law, or simple illness, you were plunged into a silence more terrifying than any noise the city could muster. Your place in this world was defined long before you ever picked up an instrument. In the rigid social pyramid of ancient Rome, you stood near the very bottom. Most street musicians were not citizens born to privilege. They were freedmen, individuals granted liberty but still bound by social and economic chains. They were foreigners from Greece or Syria, drawn to the capital's noise and opportunity, bringing their unique melodies with them. In the most heartbreaking cases, they were slaves, sent out by their masters with a command to return each night with a quota of coins, their music just another form of labor to be exploited. This was not a career one chose for glory. It was a last resort for those with no other options, a way to scrape a living from the cracks in the society's foundation. The public saw you not as an artist, but as a vagrant with a skill. The Latin language itself reveals this prejudice. You were often grouped with beggars and other public nuisances under scornful terms. Your performance was not a concert. It was a plea for charity disguised as entertainment. A wealthy man might toss a coin your way with the same detached pity he would show a crippled beggar, a transaction meant to reinforce his own status as much as to relieve your hunger. This stands in stark contrast to the musicians who lived in a different world entirely. The elite of Roman society hired highly skilled performers to entertain at their private banquets, known as symposia. These musicians, often slaves trained from childhood, were valued for their technical mastery of complex compositions. They played in rooms adorned with mosaics and frescoes, their music appreciated by an educated, captive audience. The state also employed musicians for religious ceremonies, triumphal processions, and official funerals. These players had a recognized, formal place in society. They were paid a wage, not left to the mercy of the passing crowd. Your art, however, was everywhere and yet officially nowhere. Your music was the soundtrack to the daily lives of millions, as common as the sound of cartwheels on stone. Yet to the historians and poets of the era, you were largely invisible. They recorded the grand symphonies played in temples, but they rarely bothered to write down the simple, catchy tune you played outside a bakery that made an entire street smile for a moment. Your legacy is not found in crumbling scrolls, but in the very idea of public space, in the enduring human need to fill the air with song, even when no one of importance is listening. For every 1,000 musicians whose songs died on the cobblestones, one story would be whispered through the streets, a tale to cling to during the long, hungry hours. It was the story of a performer whose melody did not just earn a coin, but changed a life. Imagine a young man, his fingers calloused from years on the lyre, playing a tune so haunting it cuts through the clamor of the forum. A wealthy patrician, walking by with his entourage, stops. He does not toss a coin and move on. He listens, truly listens, until the last note fades. An invitation follows, not a play for the crowd, but to perform at his private villa that evening. This was the dream. That single performance could open a door to a different world. Inside the villa, the air is cool and scented with incense. The floor is a mosaic of intricate patterns, not dusty stone. You perform for a captive, attentive audience of perhaps 20 people, their faces illuminated by oil lamps. The acoustics are perfect, and for the first time, you hear your own music without having to fight for its existence. A successful night could lead to a permanent position, a monthly stipend, a room in the patron's household, and the profound, unimaginable gift of stability. Your art is no longer a plea for charity, but a valued skill. History offers a shimmering, real-world example of this lottery win. His name was Messones of Crete. He was not a street musician in the desperate sense we have described, but a lyric poet and composer of immense talent who managed to achieve the ultimate patronage. He became a favorite of Emperor Hadrian himself, one of the most powerful men to have ever lived. Hadrian, a lover of Greek culture and the arts, elevated Messones to a position of imperial favor. Fragments of his compositions have actually survived the centuries, a rare testament to his recognized genius. For the musician playing on the street, the story of Messones was a distant star to navigate by. It was proof that the system could, on the rarest of occasions, reward pure talent. Yet his story also highlights the brutal truth. For every Messones who found imperial favor, there were countless thousands whose names are utterly lost to time. Their songs vanished into the air the moment they were played. The chance of a street performer rising to such heights was slimmer than being struck by lightning. It was a fantasy, but it was a necessary one. That dream, however faint, was the fuel that kept the music alive. It was the hope that today, the right person might walk by, and a single song might be enough to lift you from the struggle of the street and into the halls of legend. You were never alone in your fight for attention. The street was a chaotic stage shared by a whole cast of characters, each with their own act designed to stop a person in their tracks. A troupe of acrobats might flip and tumble into your space, their bodies a whirlwind of silent, breathtaking motion that could steal your entire audience in a heartbeat. Further down the block, a fire eater would send plumes of flame into the air, the gasps of the crowd drowning out your melody. Jugglers kept a cascade of colored balls or knives perpetually in the air, a mesmerizing spectacle of pure skill. Then there were the animal handlers, leading trained monkeys through clever tricks, or parading a massive, weary dancing bear on a chain, a sight of both wonder and pity that always drew a dense ring of onlookers. And weaving through it all were the fortune tellers, their voices low and mysterious, promising glimpses of the future for a price. Your music was just one thread in this vibrant, noisy tapestry of survival. In this relentless competition, you quickly learned that fighting your rivals was often less profitable than joining them. An informal alliance could be the difference between a good day and a great one. A musician might strike up a partnership with a dancer, your rhythmic beat on the tympanum giving her steps a pulse, her graceful movements giving your music a visual story. A poet, struggling to be heard over the din, would stand beside you, reciting his verses in time with your lyre's melody, the combination creating something richer and more compelling than either could offer alone. These small, impromptu troupes were a practical business decision. A full performance with music, dance, and words could hold a crowd for much longer, increasing the chances that someone, captivated by the complete show, would feel moved to toss a generous coin into the shared pout. These partnerships were born from shared desperation and mutual benefit, a temporary truce in the daily war for coins, but these alliances were as fragile as a lyre string. A more lucrative offer from another group could break a partnership as quickly as it formed. A disagreement over the split of the earnings could end a collaboration forever. You navigated a world of shifting loyalties, where today's partner was tomorrow's rival for the same coveted corner near the forum. Your success depended not just on your talent, but on your ability to read people, to negotiate, and to sometimes set aside your solo pride for the simple, undeniable arithmetic of a heavier coin purse at the end of the day. The elements were a manager you could never plead with or predict. On a perfect day, the sun was your ally, drawing crowds out into the open streets, but the Roman sun rarely stayed an ally for long. It would climb, turning the sky a hard, pale blue, and the heat would become a physical presence. It baked the stone pavement until it shimmered, the warmth radiating up through the thin soles of your sandals. Your tunic would stick to your back with sweat. The air itself grew thick and heavy, making every breath for your tibia a laborious effort. Your fingers, slick with perspiration, would slip on the strings of your lyre. The heat was a relentless thief, stealing your energy, your focus, and your will to play. It could also warp the very instrument you depended on. A wooden lyre left too long in the direct glare could develop a hairline crack with a sound like a tiny snap of fate. A gut string, stretched taut by the heat, could suddenly give way, its sharp twang a sound of pure financial dread. Then the wind would rise, an invisible saboteur. A strong gust could snatch the delicate sound from your tibia, scattering your melody into chaos before it ever reached a listener's ear. It would whip dust and grit from the street, stinging your eyes and coating your instrument in a fine, abrasive layer. You would have to turn your back to the gale, crouching to protect your lifeline from the assault, your performance reduced to a battle against the air itself. But all of that was merely an inconvenience compared to the true terror of rain. The first heavy drop hitting the dusty street was a sound that chilled you more than any winter wind. You had mere moments to act. For a musician with an instrument of wood and gut, a downpour was not just a cancellation, it was a potential catastrophe. A soaked lyre would never sound the same again, the wood swelling and warping, the gut strings turning slack and useless. You would clutch your instrument to your chest, desperately seeking shelter under the narrow eaves of a building or the arch of a doorway, watching as your stage emptied in seconds and the chance for a day's earnings washed away in the growing rivulets. A rainy day meant an empty purse, a gnawing stomach, and the helpless feeling of watching your livelihood dissolve into the storm. And when the short, damp days of winter arrived, a new kind of struggle began. The cold seeped into your bones, making your joints ache. It was your hands that suffered the most. Your fingers, so vital and agile, would grow stiff and numb, refusing to dance across the strings or find the precise holes of the tibia. The notes you produced would be clumsy and flat, the music itself seeming to freeze in the frigid air. You would play through the pain, stomping your feet to keep the blood flowing, blowing on your fingers during the briefest pauses, all while knowing that the cold was driving the crowds indoors. The weather was the ultimate authority. It dictated your schedule, your income, and the very quality of your art. There were no indoor concerts to escape to, no all-weather venues. Your career, your survival, was an open-air enterprise, entirely at the mercy of the skies. Yet even in this relentless daily grind, certain days shimmered on the calendar like a mirage of hope. Public festivals and holidays were the grand exceptions, the fleeting moments when the city's mood shifted from indifference to open-handed celebration. During events like the Saturnalia in December, the entire social order seemed to turn upside down. Slaves could speak freely to their masters, and the streets swelled with a tide of revelers, their purses loosened by wine and the spirit of the season. The air itself changed, thick with the scent of roasting meats from public feasts and the sweet, spiced wine known as mulsum. For a street musician, this was not just another day, it was the harvest. A well-played tune during Saturnalia could fill your pouch with a week's worth of normal income, the coins landing not as grudging charity, but as joyful tribute to the festivities. The ludi, the massive public games that stretched for days on end, created a similar frenzy, as thousands poured into the city to watch chariot races or gladiatorial combats. The main thoroughfares became rivers of potential patrons. Your music became part of the pre-show excitement, the soundtrack to anticipation. A rousing, triumphant melody on your tibia could capture the energy of the crowd heading to the Circus Maximus, inspiring a group of betting men to toss you a handful of coins for bringing them luck. Of course, you were not the only one who knew this. These golden opportunities transformed the performance landscape overnight. Musicians, dancers, and acrobats from towns and villages for miles around would flood into Rome, turning your familiar territory into a fiercely contested stage. That perfect archway near the Forum, which offered such fine acoustics, was now occupied by a troupe from Gaul with strange, captivating instruments. The corner by the bakery was taken by a fire eater whose spectacle drew gasps from a block away. You had to arrive earlier, fight harder, and be louder just to claim a patch of ground. Simply playing your usual repertoire was not enough. The holiday demanded a specialized performance. For Saturnalia, you needed rollicking, mischievous songs that celebrated the world turned topsy-turvy. For the Lupercalia in February, a festival of purification and fertility, your music might take on a more rhythmic, primal beat to match the wild energy of the young men running through the streets. You became a seasonal artist, your survival depending on your ability to mirror the specific, heightened emotions of each festival. A failure to adapt, to feel the unique pulse of the holiday crowd, meant being drowned out in the sea of competition. These brief windows of prosperity were a double-edged sword. The potential reward was immense, enough to cover your rent for a month or finally afford that new set of strings. But the pressure was immense, and the fall back to the quiet desperation of an ordinary Tuesday felt even steeper when the last festival banner was taken down and the city returned to its normal, indifferent self. Your melody could become a weapon, sharpened on the grinding stone of public discontent. In the relative anonymity of a shifting crowd, your simple song held a unique and dangerous power. A cleverly phrased lyric, wrapped in a catchy tune, could mock a senator for his greed or a tax collector for his brutality. You were a broadcaster in a world without broadcasters, turning the city's whispered gossip into a public anthem that spread from mouth to mouth faster than any official messenger could run. A song about a foolish baker burning his bread could, with a sly wink from the performer, be instantly understood by the crowd as a commentary on a foolish consul burning a province. These were the Carmina Famosa, the infamous songs, and they were your most volatile and potent material. The reward was immediate, a shower of coins from an appreciative audience thrilled by your daring. But the risk was absolute. If the wrong person, an informer or a soldier loyal to the mocked official, heard your performance, the charge was sedition. Your clever metaphor would be stripped of its poetic disguise in a courtroom, presented as a direct attack on the state's authority. The punishment for such a crime was not a fine you could never pay. It was exile, a sentence that tore you from the only world you knew and cast you out to the empire's edges. Or in the most severe cases, it could be a death sentence, a final, silent note. Every time you chose to sing one of those songs, you were placing a bet with your life, gambling that the crowd's protection would be enough to shield you from the long arm of the powerful. Amid the noise and danger, your music could also become a quiet bridge between two hearts. The tender love ballad was a staple of your repertoire, a moment of softness in a hard world. You held the stories of mythical lovers, tales every Roman knew by heart. You could sing of Dido, the queen of Carthage, burning with a forbidden love for the hero Aeneas, her heartbreak so profound it consumed her in flames. Or you would tell the tragic story of Pyramus and Thisbe, two young lovers separated by a wall their whispered promises, and final, fatal misunderstanding, a lesson in the cruelty of fate. These were not just ancient myths, they were a shared language of emotion. When you played these ballads, you were not just entertaining, you were giving voice to the private longings and sorrows of the people who stopped to listen. A young woman buying flour at the mill might pause, her eyes glistening, as your lyre recounted the sorrow of Dido, seeing a reflection of her own secret pain in the epic tale. For a moment, her daily burden felt lighter, her own heartache dignified by a story that had echoed for centuries. This was one of your most vital roles. You were an emotional escape valve for a city of millions, offering a moment of shared catharsis through a familiar, heartbreaking melody. But your services could also become far more personal and perilous. For the right price, you could be hired as a clandestine messenger of the heart. A young man, smitten but too shy or from too low a family to approach his beloved directly, would pay you to perform a serenade, an evening serenata, beneath her window. This was a job that demanded more than musical skill. It required the stealth of a spy and the courage of a soldier. You would move through the dark, sleeping streets, your instrument muffled under your cloak. Finding the correct window in a towering insula was a challenge in itself. Then, in the profound silence of the night, you would begin to play and sing, your voice a soft, carrying thread aimed at a single listener. The lyrics would be coded, full of flattering comparisons to Venus or allusions to his devotion. The goal was to stir her heart without stirring her entire family, or worse, the watchmen. It was an incredibly risky endeavor. An angry father or a protective brother could dump a chamber pot on your head or rush into the street with a club. The vigiles patrolling the night would not look kindly on a disturbance that woke paying citizens from their sleep. The reward had to be worth the very real danger of a beating or arrest. Yet for the lovers, and for you, the risk was part of the magic. In a society where marriages were often transactions and love was a secondary concern, your song became an act of rebellion, a fleeting, beautiful protest against the rigid rules of the heart. You were not just playing a tune, you were weaving a temporary musical world where emotion ruled, and for a few precious coins, you made the night itself sing with possibility. Some musicians never stayed long enough to learn the rhythms of a single city's streets. Their world was the road itself, the long, straight Roman highways that stitched the empire together. While one performer might spend a lifetime defending a corner in the Subura, another shouldered their instrument and walked, moving from one market town to the next, chasing the next festival on the horizon. This was the life of the itinerant performer, a path defined by a profound, unsettling freedom. The open road offered an escape from the territorial wars of the city and the monotony of the same faces. Each new town brought a fresh audience, ears not yet tired of your songs, and a chance to reinvent yourself. You could be a tragic balladeer from Alexandria in one village, and a lively player of drinking tunes from Hispania in the next. The very dust on your feet was a badge of this liberty, a sign that you were bound to no single master or marketplace. But this freedom was a hollow prize without the coins to fill your stomach. Your entire economic model shifted. You were no longer relying on the daily sportula of a familiar crowd, but on the concentrated payoff of a successful market day or a regional festival. A good performance in a busy provincial forum could earn you enough to travel and eat for a week. This required a keen sense of timing and gossip. You had to know when the harvest festivals were happening, when the regional governor was holding public games, or when a wealthy local landowner was celebrating a wedding. This information was your currency, traded with other travelers at roadside inns or deduced from the flow of pilgrims on the road. Your survival depended on this calendar of opportunity, a constant calculation of distance, time, and potential profit. The road itself was a gauntlet of hardships. Finding a safe place to sleep was a daily crisis. A cramped room in a scruffy inn cost precious coins, so you often sought the charity of a temple precinct or simply slept rolled in your cloak under the shelter of a large tree by the roadside. Every rustle in the darkness was a potential threat, from a common thief to a wild animal. You learned to sleep lightly, your instrument tucked securely in your arms. Navigating unfamiliar territories was its own unique terror. A wrong turn could lead you into bandit-infested hills or a region where the local tribes were hostile to outsiders. You relied on the vague directions of other travelers and the milestones placed along the Roman roads, counting down the thousands of paces to the next town. And in each new place, you faced a wall of suspicion. You were a stranger, an unknown variable. The local authorities, the duumviri in a small town, viewed you with immediate distrust. Were you a spy, a fugitive, or just a vagrant here to disturb the peace? You had to quickly ascertain the local rules, to learn which songs were safe and which noble family it was unwise to mock. A joke that earned laughter in Rome could cause offense in a conservative farming community. The loneliness of this existence was a constant, slow-burning ache. In the city, even amidst the indifference, there was a sense of shared struggle with the other street performers. On the road, you were utterly alone. You missed the familiar grunt of the baker you saw every morning, the knowing nod from a rival musician. Your only companion was the instrument on your back, and its music began to reflect the emptiness of the landscape you traveled. The songs you played for yourself on the long, quiet stretches between towns were different, slower, filled with a yearning for a place you could, for just a moment, stop moving and call home. Their names are the great silence in our history of Rome. We can walk through the ruins of the Colosseum and know the names of the emperors who commissioned it, and we can read the poems of Virgil and know the name of his patron. But the musician whose melody floated up to the cheap seats during a gladiator's final moment, the one whose song gave a slave a moment of peace on their way to the market, their names are utterly lost. This historical silence was a deliberate act of neglect. The men who wrote the histories, senators and scholars like Tacitus and Suetonius, moved in a world of politics, philosophy, and grand military campaigns. To them, the street performer was not a historical actor, but part of the urban scenery, as common and unremarkable as a stray dog. They wrote for an elite audience that would have shared this view, documenting the deeds of great men, while the daily struggles of the common people were deemed unworthy of the parchment. The very language they used confirms this. A street musician was often lumped in with beggars and vagrants under scornful labels, their art dismissed as a noisy plea for charity rather than a cultural force. Their legacy was not meant to be found in libraries, but in the very air of the city, and when that air stilled, their work vanished with it. This art was ephemeral by its very nature. There was no sheet music, no system of notation to capture the catchy folk tune that had everyone humming one week and forgotten the next. A song lived only as long as someone remembered how to play it. It was a performance that existed solely in the moment of its creation, a fleeting collaboration between the musician and the crowd that heard it. When the last note faded, the song was gone, perhaps living on in the memory of a listener for a day or a week, but eventually dissolving into the general noise of the past. This stands in stark contrast to the physical and literary remains that define ancient Rome for us today. We have the massive, enduring stones of the aqueducts and the amphitheaters. We have the meticulously copied scrolls of epic poetry and legal texts, preserved by generations of monks. These are the artifacts of power, wealth, and high culture, the things that the society itself deemed important enough to build in stone and write in ink. But the vibrant, chaotic, and beautiful soundscape of the streets, the very heartbeat of the city, has been almost completely erased. We can calculate the engineering of a Roman road, but we cannot truly hear the rhythm of the cartwheels that rolled on it accompanied by a lone tibia. We can read a satire by Juvenal about the city's noise, but we cannot recover the specific melody that brought a smile to his face one afternoon. This is one of the great lost mysteries of the ancient world. We have the stage, but we have lost the soundtrack. We know the script of the powerful, but we are deaf to the songs of the people. The music you played on a Roman street corner was never purely Roman. It was a living map of the empire itself, a soundscape stitched together from 1,000 different towns and traditions. Your simple melody on the tibia might carry the ghost of a Greek hymn, its structure refined and mathematical. The rhythm you tapped out on your tympanum could have the driving, primal pulse of an Egyptian harvest dance, learned from a sailor in the crowded taverns of the port of Ostia. This was not a conscious act of curation, but a simple matter of survival. To catch the ear of a diverse and constantly shifting crowd, you had to become a sponge, absorbing every new sound that washed into the capital. Soldiers were some of your most important music teachers. A legionary returning from a 20-year posting in Syria would not come back alone. He brought the haunting scales and intricate rhythms of the East in his memory. Sitting in a tavern, he might hum a tune he heard in Damascus, and you, always listening for something new, would quickly adapt it, fitting it to the capabilities of your lyre. That Syrian melody, stripped of its original context and blended with the Latin rhythm, would become something new, a hybrid sound that felt both exotic and familiar to the Roman ear. Traders were another vital pipeline. A merchant caravan arriving from Gaul might include a slave who could play the carnix, a long bronze trumpet with a bell shaped like a boar's head. You would never own such an expensive instrument, but you could mimic its bold, warlike blast on your own tibia, capturing its spirit for your street performance. Slaves, forcibly relocated from their homelands, carried the most poignant musical influences. A woman from Greece, now a servant in a wealthy household, might sing the lullabies of her childhood while working. You would hear these fragments of a lost home drifting from an open window, and you would weave their melancholic beauty into your own ballads, giving a voice to the empire's countless displaced souls. You were an unwitting archaeologist of sound, digging through the layers of imported culture to find what resonated. A catchy Phrygian rhythm from Anatolia might become the foundation for the season's most popular drinking song. A mournful melody from Judea could give new depth to a tragic love story. There was no single Roman street music. There was only this constant, vibrant, and unplanned fusion. The coins you earned were a vote for this new, blended sound, a proof that in the chaotic democracy of the street, the most compelling art was born from the empire's beautiful, tangled root. The educated elite of Rome viewed your struggle through a lens of rigid philosophy. A Stoic philosopher like Seneca would have watched your performance with profound disapproval. He would argue that your entire existence was a surrender to external forces, the very opposite of the virtuous life. You were not cultivating an inner citadel of reason, but prostrating yourself before the shifting whims of the crowd. Your art, in his eyes, was designed to stir up the passions, to provoke pity or fleeting joy, emotions a wise man must learn to master and transcend. A life spent chasing the jingle of a coin was a life enslaved. Seneca might have written that true poverty is not in wanting money, but in needing it, a luxury you could never afford. He would see your reliance on public charity as a form of moral weakness, a failure to achieve the self-sufficiency that defined a good life. Your music was a distraction from the pursuit of virtue, a noisy temptation pulling the masses further from reason. From the lofty perch of Stoicism, your daily battle was not a noble struggle, but a tragic display of everything a person should strive to overcome, yet another school of thought watched from a very different corner. The cynics, who rejected all social conventions, might have seen in you a kindred spirit, however rough around the edges. They championed a life lived in accordance with nature, free from the hollow pursuits of wealth and status. A philosopher like Diogenes, if he walked the streets of Rome, might have grudgingly admired your existence. You owned little more than the tunic on your back and the instrument in your hand. You were free from the burdens of property, the anxieties of political office, and the stifling rules of polite society. Your life, while one of evident poverty, was one of radical independence. You answered to no master but the crowd, and even that was a transaction, not a bond of servitude. The cynic ideal was to live like a dog, with simplicity and shamelessness, and in your own way, you were doing just that. You performed your art openly, without pretense, and slept wherever you could find a roof. Epictetus, a Stoic who began his life as a slave, might have offered a more nuanced, almost sympathetic view. He taught that while we cannot control external events, we can control our judgments and actions. He might have seen your profession not as virtuous or vile in itself, but as a field for practicing virtue. How did you handle the insult of a jeering spectator, with anger or with indifference? How did you manage the windfall of a silver denarius, with reckless spending or with prudent care? Your character, not your circumstances, was the true measure of your life. In this light, your street corner became a testing ground for resilience, a daily practice in enduring the things you cannot change. The philosophers debated the nature of a good life in their quiet gardens and colonnaded schools. But you were living the question out loud every single day, your music providing the soundtrack to your own unspoken philosophy. A single mosaic, frozen in volcanic ash, offers us a startlingly clear window into their world. Discovered in the ruins of Pompeii and known as the Barberini mosaic, this intricate artwork was not painted on a public wall, but laid into the floor of a wealthy Roman's villa. Imagine the patron of the house walking over this scene daily, a permanent fixture in their home. It depicts a traveling troupe of street musicians in vivid, colorful stone. At the center, a man plays the double tibia, his cheeks puffed with the effort of forcing air through the pipes. His costume is simple, a tunic that leaves one shoulder bare, a mark of his class and profession. Beside him, a young girl, no more than a child, clashes a pair of cymbals together, her face a picture of concentration. A young boy shakes a pair of castanets, his body caught in a slight dance step. This is not a grand, mythical scene. It is a snapshot of real life, a moment of performance captured for eternity in the home of the elite. The very existence of this mosaic is a profound statement. Someone with wealth and taste chose to immortalize these common performers in their private space. This suggests a certain fascination, perhaps even a genuine appreciation for their art. They were not entirely invisible, not merely background noise. Their energy, their skill, and their place in the cultural fabric were recognized as something worthy of art. The details are telling. The musicians are not depicted as ragged beggars, but as working performers. Their instruments are clearly rendered, the tibia with its distinct double pipes, the handheld cymbals, the clacking castanets. These were the tools of a collaborative act, a small family or troupe working together to create a richer, more compelling performance, just as we discussed earlier. Their presence in a villa floor is a paradox. It elevates them to the status of art while simultaneously reminding us of their social standing. They are literally underfoot. This mosaic is the closest we can come to hearing their music. We can look at the tibia player's strained cheeks and almost hear the reedy wail cutting through a crowd. We can see the girl's focused expression and imagine the sharp, metallic ring of her cymbals marking the rhythm. We can observe the boy's movement and feel the infectious, percussive energy of his dance. This one artifact, preserved by catastrophe, gives faces to the faceless and a fleeting, precious echo of the songs that history forgot. The mosaic from Pompeii may be ancient, but the figure it depicts is timeless. That musician, with his puffed cheeks and simple tunic, has a direct descendant performing in a subway station this very moment. The Roman street corner has been replaced by the echoing tile of a modern underpass, the tibia swapped for an acoustic guitar, but the core human experience remains almost unnervingly unchanged. The first and most critical decision is still location. Just as the ancient performer sought a spot with a steady flow of people near a fountain, today's busker needs a busy intersection of human traffic, a place where the architecture might naturally amplify a melody. They stake their claim on a patch of pavement, their open instrument case a silent plea for the sportula, now called tips. The portable instrument remains their lifeline, whether it is a lyre cradled close or a fiddle held under the chin, both representing a significant personal investment and the constant fear of damage or theft. And then there is the crowd, that same river of indifferent faces. Most people hurry past, their eyes glued to their own modern distractions, just as the Roman citizen might have been preoccupied with a political speech or the price of bread. They are background noise to the daily commute, their music a temporary soundtrack to 1,000 private journeys. Yet within that river of anonymity, the same fleeting connections are forged. A child tugs a parent's hand, mesmerized by the rhythm, just as a Roman child might have been. A stranger, struck by a particular phrase or a familiar melody, might pause, their expression softening for a moment before they drop a coin or a bill and move on. That rare, genuine moment of eye contact, that shared smile, is the same precious currency it always was. It is not really about the money, it is the profound, wordless acknowledgement that the art has landed, that for one person in the rushing crowd, the song mattered. This enduring tradition reveals a fundamental truth about our species. For over 2,000 years, through the rise and fall of empires, through technological revolutions that have reshaped our world, the human desire to create and share music in public spaces has never faded. It is a primal need to fill the air with beauty, to claim a small piece of the shared world for a personal expression, and to connect with strangers through the universal language of melody. The Roman musician's struggle for a handful of bronze asses is not a relic. It is the origin story of the music that still fills our cities, a direct and unbroken line from the cobblestones of the Suburra to the concrete of today. Lucius wakes before dawn, his stomach already tight with the familiar knot of dread. His fingers, stiff from yesterday's long hours, instinctively reach for the wooden lyre resting beside his thin sleeping mat. In the dim light, he runs a thumb across the strings, listening for any dullness, any hint of weakness. The sound is true, a small mercy that sends a flicker of relief through his weary body. He gathers his few belongings, his worn sandals whispering against the grimy stairs of the insula as he joins the river of shadows flowing toward the city's heart. His target this morning is a spot near the Temple of Vesta, where the pious crowds might be generous after their morning prayers. He sees the space is empty, a rare gift, and he settles against the sun-warmed stone, his heart pounding not from exertion, but from hope. He begins to play, a soft, reverent melody meant to match the solemnity of the place. For the first hour, it is as if he is made of air. Families pass, their attention fixed on the temple doors, their ears deaf to his offering. The coins in his small wooden bowl are few, just a handful of bronze asses that feel lighter than they should. Then, a matron emerges from the temple, her face serene. She pauses, truly listening as his fingers dance through a complex passage. She smiles, a gentle curving of her lips, and drops a silver denarius into his bowl. The coin lands with a solid, beautiful ring that seems to silence the world around him. For a glorious moment, he is not a beggar with the instrument, but an artist worthy of a patron. That moment shatters when a burly fire eater sets up his pitch just 10 paces away. The man lights his torch with a dramatic flourish, the sudden whoosh of flame startling the lingering crowd. Their heads turn, their eyes wide with a primal fascination that no melody can compete with. Lucius's music is drowned out by the gasps and applause. He tries to play louder, his fingers pressing harder against the strings, but it is useless. The fire eater claims the space, the light, the very air. Lucius meets the man's gaze, a silent challenge passing between them, but he knows he has lost. He cannot fight fire with song. Defeated, he packs his lyre and moves on, the silver denarius now feeling like a consolation prize for a battle lost. The afternoon sun is relentless, baking the forum stones until they shimmer. He finds a new spot near a row of food stalls, the air thick with the smell of frying fish and cheap wine. He plays drinking songs and lively folk tunes, his voice growing hoarse, his fingers raw. The crowds here are louder, coarser. A group of soldiers jostles past, one of them knocking over his bowl and scattering his few coins with a laugh. He scrambles to collect them from the dust, his face burning with a humiliation so deep it feels physical. As dusk begins to paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, his body screams for rest. His back aches, his throat is parched, and the hopeful energy of the morning has long since evaporated. He trudges back toward the Suburra, the city's noise fading behind him like a retreating tide. In the relative quiet of his tiny room, he empties his pouch onto the mat. He separates the coins, pushing the precious silver denarius aside. He counts the bronze asses again and again. It is enough for tomorrow's bread, for another night in this rented space, and perhaps a little watered wine to numb the ache in his hands. It is not enough for new strings, not enough for a better tunic, not enough to change anything. He lies down in the growing dark, the lyre once again by his side, and listens to the sounds of the city that used his music for a day and then forgot him entirely. Tomorrow, the sun would rise, and he would do it all again. That romantic image of the carefree troubadour is a powerful and beautiful lie. We see him in Victorian paintings, a handsome figure leaning against sun-drenched ruins, his lute the only companion he needs. Hollywood gives us the smiling musician, dancing through the forum with a song on his lips and a pocket full of gold. This fantasy speaks to our deep longing for artistic freedom, but it bears almost no resemblance to the gritty truth. The real Roman street musician was not free. He was a prisoner of the crowd's fleeting whims. The romantic myth claims he played whatever his soul desired, but the historical reality was a constant, draining performance of crowd-pleasing tunes. Your personal artistic vision meant nothing if it did not earn a coin. You did not sing epic poetry about heroes if the crowd wanted a dirty joke set to a simple beat. That so-called freedom was actually a form of intense, unrelenting pressure to conform, to mirror the mob's mood perfectly or face an empty purse. The myth paints a life of charming simplicity, a man unburdened by material possessions. The reality was a life defined by the gnawing anxiety of financial ruin. There was nothing charming about wondering if today's earnings would cover your rent, or if a single broken string would plunge you into debt. This was not a chosen minimalism. It was a desperate precarity where you were always one bad day away from hunger. The romantic lens shows a city that stops to listen, enraptured by the beauty of your song. The historical record reveals the opposite. You were part of the city's noise, a human component of the urban machinery, as easily ignored as the rumble of a cart or the shout of a fishmonger. For every person who paused, 1,000 others walked past without a second glance, their eyes sliding over you as if you were a statue or a post. Your music was the background hum to their lives, not the featured performance. This romanticized figure is a comforting fiction, but it does a great disservice to the real men and women who live this life. It erases their struggle, their resilience, and the profound dignity they found not in carefree freedom, but in their daily, determined fight to be heard at all. That silver denarius was more than a day's wages. It was a fragile validation of your entire existence. Beneath the sunburned skin and calloused fingers lay a complex inner world, a constant negotiation between passion and desperation. We can never truly know the heart of a musician 2,000 years gone, but we can trace the outlines of their spirit in the choices they made every single day. For some, the music was not a choice at all, but the only skill they possessed in a world with no safety net. A freedman, once a slave, might have learned the tibia not for love of art, but as a trade to keep from starving. A widow with no family might turn to the lyre because it was the only way to earn a coin without selling her body. For them, the music was a tool of raw survival, and the joy of playing was a luxury they could not afford. Yet for others, the drive was undeniably artistic. Imagine the young man who heard a melody in the clatter of the marketplace and felt a need to answer it. He might have practiced for hours in a quiet corner, his fingers slowly learning to translate the chaos of the city into a coherent, beautiful order. For him, the rare moment when a crowd fell silent, truly listening, was a kind of intoxication. It was a fleeting power, the ability to stop time for a dozen strangers and command the air itself. That feeling, that connection, could become its own kind of addiction, a reason to endure 100 days of indifference. This was the central paradox of their lives. The very resilience required to face constant rejection could, over years, harden into a protective shell of cynicism. You learn to expect nothing from the passing faces, to view each coin not as a compliment, but as a transaction completed. The music itself could become hollow, a repetitive series of motions designed to trigger a Pavlovian response in the crowd, a known tune that reliably opened a few purses. Yet in that same heart, a stubborn pride could still flourish. There was dignity in the mastery of a craft, however common, to keep a wooden lyre in tune despite the heat and dust, to repair a broken reed with your own hands, to feel your fingers fly across the strings without conscious thought. These were small, personal victories. No one could take that skill from you. It was a quiet knowledge that you had turned a piece of wood and got into a voice, and that you could make the sprawling, indifferent city sing, if only for a moment. Their greatest triumph was not fame or fortune, but the simple, profound act of endurance, to wake each morning and choose to create beauty in a world that often responded with apathy or cruelty. That was a victory of the human spirit. They were not just musicians, they were philosophers of perseverance, their daily lives a lesson in finding a reason to sing, even when the only audience was the empty street and the setting sun. Their story was a symphony of survival, composed of equal parts hustle, peril, and raw, unyielding humanity. The daily hustle was a relentless battle against the city's indifference, a fight for a few bronze coins that meant the difference between a meal and an empty stomach. The danger was a constant companion, from the threat of thieves and rivals to the invisible hand of a state that could silence a song with a single accusation. Yet through it all, the music itself remained their ultimate weapon, and their only solace, a fragile thread of beauty woven into the urban chaos. These were not romantic heroes living a carefree existence. They were human beings of incredible resilience, navigating a rigid social world with nothing but their wits and their talent. They created moments of connection and artistic expression in a society that often viewed them as little more than noisy beggars. Their legacy is not carved in stone or written on parchment, for they were the artists of the ephemeral, their work living only as long as the echo of their last note. But if you listen closely in any modern city square, you can still hear their echoes. In the determined strum of a guitar in a subway tunnel or the hopeful melody of a violin on a crowded street corner, the spirit of the Roman street musician lives on, a timeless testament to the human need to create and share music, no matter the cost. We would love to hear your own stories and thoughts about the buskers you have encountered. Share your experiences in the comments below, ask any questions that came to mind, and if you enjoyed this journey into the heart of ancient Rome, subscribe for more explorations into the forgotten mysteries of the past.